Welcome to Substance Painter, an interactive 3D texturing application that will allow us to paint custom texture information on top of our sculptures. As you can imagine, this environment at first can be a little overwhelming, so let's begin the process by importing our sculpture from Blender and working with it right here inside of Substance Painter. We start by going to the top of the screen and choosing the File menu and beginning a new project. And you're going to get this little project dialog box that pops up that allows us to change some of the parameters for this project. The first thing that we need to do is choose the correct template. And this template is basically going to give us a framework of how the computer is going to interpret the light and how the light is interacting with the surface. Each one of our rendering engines has a slightly different recipe, if you will, of how the light is going to be interacting with their local materials and shaders. The best place to begin is this ASM PBR metallic roughness. This is a core bit of technology that can be used in a lot of different rendering engines, and I like using it to begin. The next thing that we're going to do is that we have to select the file, our low-res sculpture file that we exported from Blender. So this is going to be our low-res one. We'll start working with the high-res one here in a minute. Let's go ahead and open it up, and then we choose the resolution. This determines the pixel resolution of all the textures that Substance Painter is going to create for us. At a pixel grid of 1024 by 1024 pixels, it's kind of a low-res texture. We're not going to get we're not going to get the quality that I think we're striving for. A good middle ground is 2048. If you have a really high-end machine, or if you know that you're going to be placing this in an environment that is where the camera is going to be right next to the object, then a texture resolution of 4096 by 4096 may be appropriate. Let's do 2K, 2048 by 2048, and choose the correct normal map format. Now, if you're working on a PC, the way the computer is going to be interpreting these normal maps is different based on the graphics library that operating system is built around. And for the Windows operating system, they use the DirectX graphics library. If you're a Mac user, you want to choose OpenGL. I'm a Mac user, so I'll choose OpenGL. And then the remainder of this is stuff that we really don't need to worry about. We have good UVs, good topology, good materials. We don't necessarily need to worry about the UDIM workflow. That's super advanced. We don't want the computer to auto unwrap our model because we already did that with our good UVs over inside of Maya. Some of you may have done it in Blender. And we don't need to import any of our cameras. So the remainder of this bottom stuff, we can just kind of leave alone. Let's hit the OK button and see what we get. Takes a couple seconds to load in the scene, and voila, here we go. Now we're starting to see we have our model over here and our UVs on the right. So welcome to Substance Painter. If your screen doesn't look exactly like mine, don't worry. Hit the F1 key, or maybe the F2 key, or the F3 key, and explore how the computer changes what you're seeing in front of you. I've hit the F1 key, and as you can see, it divides both my viewport into an interactive 3D view on the left, and then a view of my UVs on the right. And I always like to have them both open on the screen at the exact same time. It just allows me to see precisely what the computer is doing as it creates all of these wonderful textures for us. Let's talk for a second about how we can navigate around our 3D view, because in every sense, this is going to be the primary work area for our little texturing of our turtle here. And the keyboard commands are almost identical to that of what we're used to seeing over inside of Maya. If you hold down the Option key and then left mouse button and drag, you'll do an orbit. Option middle mouse button is going to do the pan. And then, of course, Option right mouse button is going to zoom in and zoom out. So that's a pretty neat way. We also get a great 3D compass down over here that keeps us kind of in alignment with the global orientation of our X, Y, Z axes. So the viewport is where we're going to be able to see our textures and then paint on top of our model, which is pretty neat. If we go way over here to the right-hand side of the screen, we have some really important bits of information that will help us customize and create our textures. Let's start at the top where it says Texture Set List. These are the two textures that we're going to be asking Substance Painter to create for us. If you remember correctly, back over in Blender, we separated our model into two different materials, one called body and one called shell. Substance Painter recognized those materials and used the polygonal assignment from those materials to determine which polygons are going to show up inside of these texture sets. Whatever I do to the body texture set is going to be saved inside of Substance Painter separately from the shell. So these are the two materials that I set up over in Substance Painter, which is exactly what I want. By having them be their own materials, I can increase the quality of each one of these materials and their corresponding texture set very directly. So I'm going to select the body. Here's something that's kind of cool. If you click on the visibility icon, you can actually turn off the polygons that are associated with that material, which is pretty neat. Actually, excuse me, it's not a material here in Substance Painter. They're called texture sets. Now, below our texture set list, we have our layers palette. And this is going to be our environment where we start to paint and add a whole series of images and customized texture information to the object itself. Each one of these texture sets gets its own layers palette. Let me show you specifically what that looks like. We're going to talk a lot about these in detail going forward, but just as an illustration, I'm just going to create what's called a fill layer here. I'm going to change its color. I'm on the shell texture set, and I just wanted you to see this. So I've flooded the entire texture with this fill color on the shell texture set. However, if I was to go to the body texture set, now we're just seeing the layers that are associated with this one texture set. Notice that we don't see the red fill layer that we saw over in the shell layer. There we go. All right, let's get rid of this thing. We don't need it anymore, and we'll continue working. So the layers stack over here is going to give us all of the layers that are assigned to a specific texture set. In addition, we also have some global settings that we can adjust and behave and perform inside of each one of these texture sets. More on this later. It's kind of advanced, but there's some important things in here as well. Now, below the layers palette, we have our properties area. And this properties panel is going to allow us to control a number of different things. It's going to allow us to control our brush settings, our alpha shapes, all of our stenciling that we can do. We can also change all of the material properties as well. This is going to be a little bit, this is the biggest hurdle for us to overcome because there's a lot of area packed in a small space. The thing that I like to recommend to people is to remember that these little tabs here that will help us quickly navigate through all these major channels inside of the properties panel. Specifically, we'll probably be dealing with the material area the most because it exposes all of the channels that are going to define how the light is going to interact with the surfaces of these textures. Okay, now in this center part is where it gets really fun. This is our material library, and before we go any further, it's important to point out that my material library is going to look very, very different from yours. I'm a long-time Substance Painter user, so over the years, I've been collecting materials for all the projects that I've worked with. The Substance Painter is going to come with a whole series of material presets that are available to you, but I've added a whole bunch more on top of what you find in the default installation. And these materials do a great job of very quickly describing the power of substance, because it's not just a material that we're applying, it's an understanding of all of the micro details all wrapped up into one preset. Let me show you an example of this. So I'm working on the body here. And this is purely as an illustration, what if I wanted the body to be brass? Well, there's this wonderful material preset that's called brass. And if you look at the big picture here, it's more than just color. There's roughness in there. There's scratches and dirts. There's a whole bunch of information packed in this one preset. If I was to left click and drag this over into my layers palette for my body, it's automatically going to apply that preset to all of the polygons that have been applied or that have been assigned to that material. And now I have this wonderful brass statue of my little turtle, which is incredibly entertaining, especially if you think it's got little dirt and bumps in there and stuff. It's a whole lot of fun. Shoot, if I hit the undo key, maybe I want to use this aluminum one. Let's see what it looks like. Yeah. It's pretty interesting. It's a lot of fun. I dig it. So you can have fun with this. Experiment, explore. That's kind of cool. The copper one's neat, and just really enjoy how Substance is using these collections of information, because it's not just one channel. It's actually doing. If you look over here, it's actually doing rivets and lines. It's a tremendous amount of information packed into one preset. You can even stack them on top of each other. Now I got the car preset, the car paint preset, and yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it's pretty neat. It can be a tremendous amount of fun. So these preset libraries can get really intense. You can make your own presets. You can buy presets. You can find free presets online that will get you started. You're never going to find a super preset that's going to do everything that you want it to do. These presets are designed to be the starting point, not the conclusion of our entire texturing process. I have a whole bunch of them. I'm a big fan of these smart materials. You can see that our library here is divided into a whole series of tabs, each tab being a collection of different assets. You can see that there's just a lot of information that we then can layer into the scene or into our texture set to produce a really great looking scene itself. So this bottom area is designed to be our material library, our substance library. Lastly, we have our tools on the right-hand side, or the left-hand side of the interface. We'll be going through and using a lot of these tools throughout the conclusion of this project, and we'll look at the function and role of some really important tools as they relate to each stage. So welcome to working inside of Substance Painter.